cooperative. So Kleros, if you're not familiar, is a decentralized dispute resolution platform. I'll talk a bit about that today. But more generally, I'm going to talk about voting, and voting in various cryptoeconomic systems. So most people, when you think about voting on blockchain systems, you probably think of this, voting in DAOs. So maybe you have some kind of DAO, people make propositions, debate on a forum, like maybe the proposition is to like give a grant to some kind of project, maybe a public good, maybe to change a parameter, and then after some like healthy democratic debate, people go to snapshot, you know, like people vote, and ultimately if it passes, it's executed. But there are other kinds of voting that one has in blockchain world. So another type of system that is particularly relevant to Kleros, so I think a lot about this, is based on shelling points. So it's particularly relevant in certain oracles. So the idea here is that you have a sort of incentivized voting. It's based on this idea by Thomas Schelling, who was an economist. They came up with this idea of a focal point or a Schelling point, which is a solution that people tend to gravitate towards in the absence of communication because it seems sort of natural or special. And an adapted version of the thought experiment he liked to talk about is that if you wanted to meet someone in Paris on a given day, but you didn't know what time and where, well, what would you do? Well, you'd probably go stand under the Eiffel Tower at noon, with the idea that, well, the Eiffel Tower is like a distinguished place, and noon is kind of a distinguished time, so I'm going to go there, just kind of expecting the other person to also go there because it kind of stands out. I feel you. I've done it. And then the idea of a Schelling point oracle is that you can like ask people a question. Well, so Kleros is a Schelling point oracle-based system, and then the idea here is that you know, people can have like different kinds of contracts where they have like some kind of agreement. Maybe like that agreement could lead to a dispute, and then if there's some kind of disagreement between participants that like a system needs to resolve, you have a subjective question about like who was right in like maybe a dispute between a freelancer and a small business owner. You can randomly draw a handful of crowdsourced participants, and then you ask them the question, and you incentivize them so that the answer is the Schelling point. You say, okay, who was right in this dispute between Alice and Bob, the freelancer and the small business owner, and they're incentivized to agree with how the other people vote, or at least how the other people vote after like a potential possibility of appeals. We have an appeal process in Kleros, but don't worry about that. So they are incentivized to think, like, how will the broader community act? Like, if other people are thinking about this case, what will they think? And I try to think about that too. And then the idea is that the true answer should be a Schelling point because you think other people came to the same true answer as you want to agree with them, so you all vote for that. Okay, so those are two kinds of sort of voting schema. Like, how are they different and how are they similar? I mean, you're voting in both cases. But like a first key point, that's like fundamental point between these two kinds of voting like situations, is the incentives for the participants are completely different. For the DAO voting, you vote because you care. Like, you're engaged in the community, you want your proposition to pass. Maybe you have a financial incentive in the proposition passing. Maybe you just like, you know, you believe in the goals of the community and you want to participate. For the Schelling point oracle voting, generally, you don't necessarily care what the outcome is like on a personal level. You don't care if the freelancer or the small business owner wins their dispute. You just want to be incentivized. You want to get a reward, or at least like not be penalized in the sort of payoff system that comes with this scheme. So note that this kind of question between kind of governance voting, voting because you care, kind of like voting in national elections, versus this kind of like task voting, which is maybe more akin to like voting on like Amazon Mechanical Turk or something. You know, this is not unique to blockchains. There are people that have done a lot of research on this in social choice theory and peer prediction and like these existing academic fields. And in my talk, I'm going to draw on some of those ideas. But there's some like unique things in blockchains that one wants to keep in mind. We have like sort of our own kind of attack profiles for how we want our systems to be resistant to the kinds of attacks that exist in cryptoeconomic systems. So there's, you know, like a blockchain twist on some of the existing work people have done. Okay. And note that there's what might initially look like a third kind of voting, where if you have a consensus algorithm and you're like a miner or a validator, at some point there might be two blocks that appear at the same height.
you have the question of like, okay, which fork should I mine upon? And that is a kind of vote. You have to pick one. And if you think about it, like this actually has the same structure as the shelling oracle that Kleros uses, in that you want to be on the one that everyone agrees upon. If you mine on upon a block that like doesn't wind up getting included in the longest chain, you'll either not get any rewards, even if you find a successful block, or maybe you get like an uncle reward or something. But you certainly get less rewards than if you mined on the main chain. So again, you have this like voting where you don't necessarily care which fork wins, but you want to agree. And notice that in both situations, DAOs and shelling point voting, sometimes you have multiple choices. You don't have like a nice clean binary choice. In your DAO, maybe you have like different projects people are proposing to fund project A, project B, project C. You can only fund one of them, you have a limited budget. Maybe somebody proposed like a troll like proposition as like troll option along with the others. This is like give all the money to Bob, Bob's an attacker. Maybe on a shelling point oracle, you can use Kleros, for example, as kind of like a decentralized social media platform content moderation system, where you ask our jurors, okay, like somebody posts like an abusive message, how should they be penalized? Maybe they should be penalized by suspending them for a day or a week or 3 days, or maybe they were fine and you shouldn't take any action at all. So you have these like nuanced choices that aren't binary, and you have to like pick between several options. And in both cases, you run into classical problems with how voting systems work, and particularly how like naive voting systems work. So if you think about the like simplest voting system, the one that like probably you're the most familiar with, that has like the longest history in human history, that's plurality voting system, or first past the post. And here the idea is that I'm just going to ask everybody what their first choice is, even if there are multiple options. I'm going to count how many votes each option gets, and whoever gets the most votes, they win. Even if they don't have a majority. And this is a problem in both kinds of voting for slightly different reasons. In DAO voting, well, maybe like there's like one weird choice that gets like a plurality of votes, but isn't representative of the broader community, but it gets through anyway because the other votes are fragmented between similar outcomes. In shelling point voting, maybe, we have notions of 51% attack resistance in crypto economics that are relevant here too. Identity systems and blockchains are hard. Maybe like an individual can control multiple votes. And if the honest participants are fragmented between, again, similar options, that lowers the bar for 51% attack resistance. So that like an attacker that has, like 25% or something of the votes, like no longer has to have 50% of the votes to get their vote through. They just have to beat the fragmented other choices. So you don't really want to use this as a voting system. You want to do something better. So social choice theorists that have thought over decades and centuries about voting systems typically have the solution of asking people who vote for more information than just a single choice. And one thing you can ask them to do is provide a ranked ballot. So here the idea is that, okay, I have these 4 choices. Voters, please rank 1 to 4. And then the voter here is like, okay, the pink angel's the best, yellow angel's cool, the green angel's okay, devil last. There are various ways that you can put this together and to produce a collective outcome. So the actual mechanism for determining the winner is not super relevant to my talk, but I just give a couple examples to give you a sense of how this could work. What you should really kind of take away from the next couple of examples is the kinds of information that the voters are providing to the system. But one thing you can do is you can use what's called the Boris System, where each vote gets a certain number of points for how high they rank the choice. So if I give an option my first choice, it gets 3 points. If I give an option my second choice, it gets 2 points. Third choice, it gets 1 point. And if I put the option last, it doesn't get any points. And then you count the number of points each option has, and the option with the most points wins. Another thing you can do is called instant runoff. Australian parliamentary elections use this. And here the idea is that you simulate a series of runoffs. Again, you have a ranked ballot. People rank options 1 to n, n being the number of choices. And then the idea is that the option with the least first choice votes gets eliminated. That's the pink angel in this example. And the second choices of all the people who voted for the pink angel get reassigned to their second choice. So then you keep doing this. You eliminate the the option with the least first choice votes each time until you eventually only have like a head-to-head battle between two options, and then the winning option has to at least get be preferred to sort of the next best option on a majority of ballots. But there are other kinds of information that the voters can provide. There's this system called approval voting, where you just like say, okay, this option's okay, this option's not okay, this option's okay, but you don't provide like discretion or distinction between the options you think are okay. It's like okay or not okay. And then typically you take the option with the highest percentage of vote approval is the winner. There's another option called jugement majoritaire, which was like innovated by some like majority judgment by some like French researchers sort of in the last few years. Where here like it's still not a ranking. You say okay, you can have like different classifications for how you give for what you rate options. You can say, oh, this is great, this is awful, this is mediocre, this is okay. But you can give multiple options the same ranking. Like everybody can be great or everybody can be awful. So it's not the same thing as like ranking 1 to n, but again, you're giving sort of the system more information. And one thing that voting theorists have realized historically is that all voting systems are flawed. There's no perfect voting system. So there's this famous theorem of arrows from the 50s that any ranked choice voting system has strategic voting. There are situations where people will be incentivized to vote tactically. Strictly speaking, this theorem is only for the ranked choice system, so it doesn't apply to approval voting or majority judgment, but they have their own strategic voting. Like it's just different. And subsequently, voting theorists, once they're like, okay, no perfect voting system, they've spent the ensuing decades trying to like look at trade-offs between different kinds of voting systems. It's like, okay, every voting system has a problem, but like what problems am I willing to accept in order to have other good properties? I want to have like property A, like maybe I want to make sure that if I like participate and vote for something that I like, it's not going like that, my extra presence of my vote isn't going to cause it to lose, but that's going to like, by accepting that, I have to accept some other weird property that, like there's gonna be some other pathology that comes along with that. And there's this like series of trade-offs where you're like, okay, I'm willing to accept these negative properties in exchange for these good properties. And then for like crypto, and generally if you're designing a voting system, you have to ask yourself, okay, like what do I care about? If I'm designing a DAO governance voting system, or if I'm designing a Schelling oracle, like what trade-offs are important to me? So just to give you a couple of quick examples of things that one might think about, in the Schelling oracles, you care a lot about lazy voting and disincentivizing lazy voting. And this gets back to this idea that the individuals don't care about the outcome of the case, like intrinsically. So like maybe, if they can get the same reward by like voting randomly or not putting in effort, they would want to do that. So you have to make sure that the incentive system that sort of is like being imposed on your participants is strong enough to make them actually review the case, to actually spend effort and think about the case. And so there are different kinds of lazy strategies. Like every voting system has a lazy strategy because you can always vote randomly. But some have other lazy strategies. For example, in approval voting, maybe your lazy strategy is just to click, I approve everything, everything's great. And maybe everything is great, or maybe not. And there's like an interesting sort of parallel of this to back to the consensus algorithms. So if you like squint as a metaphor, if you think of like being in a naive proof of stake algorithm where you can like validate on multiple chains, there's like no penalty for trying to, in the case of a fork and having multiple blocks at the same height, trying to validate apart from each block. You're not spending extra electricity to mine on both blocks as opposed to just one because proof of stake. Then you just mine on everything. So you're kind of in the situation of the approval voter that's like, prove of everything. And this is the nothing at stake problem. And the solution that the Ethereum Foundation and people who have like designed better proof of stake algorithms has been to prevent you from doing this. You have to choose. If you try to validate on multiple blocks, multiple forks, you get slashed. So you're forced to make a choice. And in the upcoming version of the version 2 of Kleros, we take a sort of similar principle for how multiple outcome votes should happen, in that we plan to use a ranked choice system. So the system will be like, there will be a modularity in version 2 of Kleros. So actually you can have different kinds of voting systems for different kinds of cases. But like one thing particularly we plan to develop for many cases is a ranked choice voting system where you provide your ranking candidates 1 to n. And basically, like, you're forced to, like, you can't just say everything is cool. You have to, like, give in more input to the system than that. You have to say, okay, like, even if everything is cool, this option is better than this option. And then there's an incentive system that goes along with that gives you a payoff based on how high you place the winner. So back just briefly to the approval system lazy strategy. Like, you could design an incentive system that will go along with approval voting that would disincentivize this. But it turns out that if you sort of look at lazy strategy payoffs, you get more leverage with the ranked choice system in that you can kind of have like lower fees and lower deposits with ranked choice voting by compared to approval voting for the same level of resistance to lazy voting. So you're getting sort of more leverage from your incentive system. So note that in Endow voting, there are kind of lazy behavior too, even if it's not quite the same. And that if you're being lazy in Endow voting, you're probably just not going to vote. You know, like maybe there are tons of propositions on the forum, like reading all those arguments, I don't have the energy for that. So you don't vote. And it turns out that a lot of DAOs have pretty low turnout. And the typical solutions people have to this involve delegation, committees chosen by election or sortition. And here, you know, like with the previous slides where I was talking about lazy voting and shelling games, our solution was to sort of like exaggerate my incentives on my participants so that they like had a bigger stake via the incentive system in making a good choice. Here, people have a bigger stake in making a sort of choice for the DAO because the delegates have more weight. Their vote means more. It's more likely that their outcome is going to win because they have like people delegating to them. So if I care about the solution, like the outcome of the proposal on the DAO, you know, maybe if I only had one vote, like it's like, it's not, you know, my vote's not gonna make a difference. But if 100 people have delegated to me, I'm gonna put in the effort. I'm going to like really think about the proposition. Another kind of vein of things people think about in blockchain voting to try to innovate on making better voting systems is around having voting systems where people can express strength of preference. So for example, in commitment voting, people can offer to lock up or can accept to lock up funds if their proposal wins. And this is a way of expressing that, yeah, I really care about this thing, so their votes should get more weight. Another voting system which people are very enthusiastic about, I couldn't have a presentation like this without mentioning it, is quadratic voting, where here the idea is that you have some number of credits and you can give them to different outcomes. It's kind of like the board account from before, but now the number of votes that translates into for the different outcomes is the square root of the number of credits you give it. So you can give all of your credits to one candidate and that candidate would get 10 votes. Or, you know, you can split the credits more evenly, 36 votes here, 36 votes there, and you sort of get, in practice, more votes. So there's this trade-off that you as a voter have between caring a whole lot about one thing versus being like, oh, like there are a lot of good options. You know, I like don't want to dilute my weight. So I'm going to like accept that like, even though I care about this, like really like this one thing a little better, I'd rather have a voice in more options. But this sort of illustrates what I just said. And note that in Kleros and in many shelling point oracles, typically there's only one outcome that will be executed. If I create a contract, you know, I'm the freelancer and small business owner, or I am on the decentralized social media platform, there are coded into the smart contract, there's gonna be like, okay, if the jurors rule 0, this will happen. I also get a refund. If the jurors rule 1, I'll split the money between Alice and Bob. If the jurors rule 2, like Bob will get the payment, and you know, the freelancer will be paid. And if the jurors rule 3, then I'll give like my freelancer in this decentralized, you know, like freelancing dispute an extra week. And only one of those things is going to be chosen. Whereas in the DAO votes, it's more natural to have multiple outcomes being applied at the same time. Maybe you have a budget and you want to fund multiple goods, public goods, multiple investments, and you can fund more than one. You just can't fund all of them. Maybe I'm electing a legislature and I'm picking different people, and I have like lots of people, but you know, not everybody's going to be elected, but like you know, dozens or hundreds of people will be elected. So in the quadratic voting, you'll notice that like it doesn't really make sense to have this strength of preference trade-off if only one thing is going to win. I think that by giving all of my credits to the yellow angel, the white yellow angel is going to win. Well, that was my first choice. I'm just going to give them all of my credits. Whereas in a Schelling point system, you can imagine still applying quadratic voting, even though this trade-off between strength of preference and wanting to have a voice over lots of options doesn't make sense anymore because a lot of options aren't going to be selected. But now instead of thinking of this as strength of preference, you can imagine using quadratic voting in a Schelling point oracle as an expression of certainty. If I'm really sure that the yellow angel is the right answer, I might give it all of my credits. And this could make sense even only if the one answer is chosen. But then again, you have to make sure that whatever incentive system you use that goes along with this resists lazy voting strategies. Note, just as an aside, in quadratic voting, you need civil resistance. If someone has multiple votes, they can sort of manipulate their credit votes between their different votes to give themselves more weight and kind of a manipulated weight compared to people who only have one vote. So it's really important to make sure that each participant only has one vote. And a solution to this, to make sure that your different voters or individual human beings, is to use a civil resistant proof of personhood tool, for example, proof of humanity. This is a curated list where if people can submit themselves as a unique human being, and then if that's challenged, that leads to a dispute over whether you're eligible to be on the list, whether there's a duplicate of you, for example, already on the list, and those disputes are handled, again, by Kleros. But then you can use this to enable better voting systems like quadratic voting, where you need to have civil resistance. And there are other voting systems which I don't have time to discuss, things from peer prediction, that would also sort of need the same tools. And then just as one final point, so I said in the version 2 of Kleros, we're planning to have a modular system where you can have different kinds of voting for different kinds of cases, but particularly good will be these ranked voting systems. And that's true. However, another thing that we're planning to add to the next version of Kleros is a automatic forking mechanism. This is seen as a tool to provide 51% attack resistance, where if they're sufficiently contentious cases that get appealed a sufficiently number of times,
I was
maybe they're
pretty sure. Well, there's some family issues. I'll need to see how that's gonna go.
The important thing to notice is that it's not enough to just have this.
But I mean, either way, I'm helping out with the hackathon and everything, so I'm not gonna slack off with that.
Hello, you hear me? Yeah, cool.
Hamid has some binaural beats over there, huh? This watermelon is on the verge of getting real bad.
Hey everyone.
Tommy is going to take it.
So I think Clément is not available right now. So we start. George, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So the Gnosis Merge happened last week, which spent the first few weeks, or few days of the week on the details. If you want to test anything on POS Gnosis, are on Slack. I'm trying to get confirmation what exactly the plan is for Gnosis. I think they're still going to try to merge anyway on Ethereum and front run them in a way. The problem I have with that is I couldn't test the nodes that we wanted to use. So I'm forced with Prism and Lighthouse at the moment. And we had issues with those. So continuing on that, the clock is ticking on that. And finally, there's also a demo available for the evidence decentralization. You can find it on Google Drive or in the V2 chat.
Sounds good. Thank you, George. Green?
Hey, so I was mainly working on state curate simplifications. So the changes are, I guess there are too many to enumerate. So I'll just say that, yeah, it was just solving security issues, simplifying some gas optimizations. At the end of the process, state curate will be ERC20 compatible with stakes, NFT, ERC721 visible. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been working on.
Thank you, Green. Alesh?
Yeah, I have been mostly working on Kleros V2 interface. Yeah, good progress on the dashboard. Maybe it's 80% done. So yeah, quite good. So I have been working with you and the Met on the simplified Kleros liquid for fun demo. So yep, that's it.
Didn't attend to it
All
for
right.
one day.
Yeah, about the V2 frontend. So there are some upgraded contracts, both on Goerli and Rinkeby. Rinkeby is supposed to be deprecated, but it's probably more convenient to keep using it a little bit more because the contracts are not verified on Arbitrum Goerli. They cannot be verified right now. So maybe for front-end development, it's easier if we use Rinkeby, if we keep using Rinkeby, Arbitrum Rinkeby.
Yeah, so have they been redeployed? Like, have you been able to shave the 2 kilobytes that were needed? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and the next step is the subgraph redeploy.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Is Rinkeby also getting deprecated? I knew of Kovan, but Rinkeby as well?
Yeah, it's supposed to get deprecated, but it doesn't look like Arbitrum is planning to deprecate it for now. So,
yeah. Which testnet is recommended, like the most?
Goerli.
Goerli and Sepolia, I think.
Goerli and which one?
Yeah. Goerli and Sepolia.
Oh, Sepolia. Okay, yeah.
All right, thank you, Alesh. Actually, Andrei, if you want to go.
Yeah, so I continued with the proof of humanity front end, adding missing functionality and fixing the subgraph bugs. I think like there will be a demo ready application by end of this week. It's a bit harder to predict how long it will take on with older with V1 profiles because there the subgraph takes a lot to sync. So if there is a bug on that subgraph and it crashes, then then good luck, Andre. And that's it for me. By the way, JB, did you also say you started looking into the proof of humanity contracts?
Yeah, I stopped at 40% last week reviewing. Yeah, it's on my list as well. What is your timeline again for finishing the review?
For finishing the review?
Yeah. Is there any hard deadline?
Well, not really. I'm just right now, since the contracts are mostly done, I'm just trying to get as much ISO as it's good. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Andre. Emmett, I don't know if you had anything.
Yeah. So yeah, the one we were working on earlier, the simplified drawing mechanics for Kleros Liquid. I'm looking at deploying that to Goerli using Truffle dashboard. Since still getting used to Truffle, but they have a new feature to make deployment easy. And for I did some planning last week with Annabelle and Guangmian about the Infinite Hackathon in for DevCon. Also with Guangmian, we prepared the first batch of D-Work bounties, and like we'll be able to release that soon. I was able to get us also on the wait list for Eden Protocol. So this is like basically if ever we have external contributors and if ever we have more external contributors, it'll be easier to manage, like matching them with different projects. So you don't need to like individually screen each one. But yeah, that's it on my end.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, I had a call with someone from Wonderverse last week, and it looks like there are already quite a few of these solutions now, like bounty / project management. So it looks a lot like debunk, and they were maybe keen to do some content, co-publishing of content, or like maybe some Twitter space or something. I don't know if you already want to do it, if there's already some other partnerships, but
that's the thing where at this point it might start getting redundant. I mean, I'll still look into them, but it might start getting redundant because with D-Work also they offered to do some like co-marketing and I don't know. I'm leaning a bit towards them because like I mean our product demo is really good
I tell
and
you exactly
the
who to
founders have been
co-market with.
big fans of
Kleros.
Kleros for a couple of years now. And
all right.
what about the other one you showed, like other something like for DAO, like non-transferable DAO tokens? Oh wait, I think you have that next week. Fine.
Yeah, it's. I think they're still looking for the product market fit, but they're working on interesting features like some DAO to DAO collaboration with. You could have workspaces per DAO and have some collaboration between DAOs on specific things, and it's all connected to GitHub. And you can have bounties on PRs and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of fun.
I'll do like some pros and cons between all those, like before launching the first batch. But yeah, thanks for that.
Right. Thanks, Annette. Okay, Daniel?
Yes, so I'm working on cross-chain for Polygon. I did some testing. I basically prepared the contract for the review, so they can be reviewed now. The links are on the Slack channel. So there are some issues, like there is some issues on the real issue front end, but I don't know, maybe it's just testnet related. I notified Edmund anyway. And also there is like kind of a big issue that currently dispute resolver does not support Goerli and Mumbai cross-chain. So I don't know how difficult it is. I asked Ferit and he said he looked into it, but he said that it might take some time to resolve it. So I don't know how long it should be. We should expect it to resolve.
Is the problem to just connect to the network, or is it about the evidence display?
Well, I mean, the issue basically, if you go to the dispute resolver for this particular dispute created on the by the Mumbai cross chain, it just doesn't say anything. It says that like, there is basically like one sentence that can display something like this, and we don't know yet the nature of it. But we already have dispute resolver working on the XDAI cross chain, so maybe it's not that difficult in the end.
Okay.
But we can't say yet for sure. But I think maybe if Ferit will take like more than expected, maybe we should, I don't know, help him if possible.
Yeah, maybe.
Because the issue,
Yeah, I guess it depends if he means 1-2 weeks or 1 month or.
Oh, he said pessimistic prognosis would be like 1 month. He said, but I think it might be faster.
Okay.
So yeah. For now, I want to finish this V2 bug fix. I want to like make a test as I was it shouldn't take much time. And after this, I will continue with cross-chain, working on bots particularly, which I don't know much about yet, but I want to like at least start digging into it tomorrow on Wednesday.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, Shotaro?
Yeah, so I started looking at Daniel's PR for the sortition tree modularity. I'll gather my feedback and provide that probably later today. Yeah, and the Kleros moderate the Telegram bot is finally hosted, so all of the infrastructure involved. It's working, you know, not just from my laptop. So there's a Telegram group to test out the bots. I'm already gathering some valuable feedback about, well, I tested this mainly on PC or, you know, in the Telegram clients for a laptop. So there are different experiences on mobile. So I'm going to make a few changes there. So right now the minimum bond is pretty low. It's like 0.2 of a penny, you know, just so that people can play with it, and you know, stakes are very low. And I set the centralized arbitrator to myself, but I think probably, you know, maybe tomorrow we'll put this in the trading group, the unofficial Kleros trading group, set the arbitrator to the Gnosis chain curation court, and set the minimum bond to 5 DAI. Yeah, so the bots finally looks like it's in good shape. Just some UX improvements, and yeah, we can start gathering some like real feedback. Yep.
Cool. Do you know if there's any chance we can make a PR for Reality's front end to make it just so the question can be formatted a bit better? It's really quite painful on the eyes.
Yeah, I made an issue to support Markdown to at least have hyperlinks to the URLs. Yeah, the reality question, it includes all of the relevant information, but because the rules and messages are uploaded to IPFS, there's a really long content ID. So, and those don't display well on Reality. I mean, all of the relevant information is there, but yeah, like what would it take to like host a Reality front end at like moderate.kleros.io just for moderation? I mean, maybe we'll see how you know, could be a future effort to you know, if moderation takes off and it's being successful, we could think about that. So.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. Plinio?
Yes. From last week, I've been mostly incorporating the feedback received single landing page. So yeah, just basically making the change suggested by Federico and Arjun, including some other sections and other information on the page. And also working on a GIF to illustrate one part of this page, which is the part explaining the price mechanism. So still working on that part. And yeah, apart from that, I also updated the ecosystem chart with the new integrations and advanced a little bit more on the Kleros board since Wednesday, but not much.
Thanks, Plinio. Colmian? Don't know if you had anything?
Hey, no, nothing from my side today. Just listening in.
All right. And I think we have a community member, I see, Ned. I don't know if you wanted to say anything or ask a question.
It's all good. I'm listening in and absorbing all the information and learning the language. Thank you so much for having me here.
You're welcome. All right. Is there any other question for today?
I have a question about the bots for when V2 goes live. Are we going to deprecate them for V1 or continue running them?
Oh, good question. I think the bots will be different. There's still going to be some kind of bots for the L1 side of the. So we will have some kind of adapter in front of the Kleros liquid contract, and I think the bot will do slightly different things. So we could maybe even make fresh new ones. Would be probably easier.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Well,
But it's probably one of the last things we are going to do in the migration process.
But I can expect that in a few months' time, or when it goes live, that we're going to be turning off some of the older ones.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the notification system, is that going to change as well?
I can't say right now. I think we might as well make fresh new ones, so it fits into the new platform that you have.
All right.
It would be much better. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
yeah, like as far as the timeline goes, I mean, like until the rollups fully decentralize, we would, like right now there's still multi-sigs and so on. Like we would still have a Kleros court on mainnet on L1 that doesn't forward disputes to the V2 court on optimistic rollup. But we would only like completely deprecate the L1 court when the optimistic rollups are really fully decentralized, and then L1 disputes, right? I mean, that's like the idea.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Yeah. Yeah.
And, yeah.
We can. So yeah, the probably sort of adjusted roadmap, which is probably hasn't been really communicated yet because it's sort of part of it is out of our control, but we'll probably at some point communicate that the launch is going to be a very soft launch with maybe a subcourt, maybe a curation subcourt on L2.
We're all about soft launches.
At least on the test net, but
hard launch
could be on the main net with a very small amount of PNK until, as you said, the rollup is decentralized. At least the sequencer is maybe not the worst, but the way they upgrade the centralized.
Yeah. And I remember at some point, maybe JB, you even asked if like anyone could take the initiative to look at EPNS. I guess everyone was too busy, but yeah, if we would have a new notifications, I guess EPNS could be that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we just have more.
Regarding EPNS, I have heard lately that they are quite centralized, and in fact, for Proof of Humanity, they said that they would give us the repositories with all the code that they are using to notify.
Oh.
But we never saw the repository, so yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if it's a good idea, but for sure, it's something worth looking into.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to replace. And it's just nice to have additional channels of notification. Some people like to have emails. Push notifications sometimes don't really work. Like it's easy to get buried in the feed. Well, emails too, actually. So I guess it's just good to have more ways to be notified. And there's also dispatch, which is completely really experimental. So we've met them with Guangyan in Paris. They're the ones doing NFTs rendered as text for messages. So it's on-chain, literally on-chain messages.
Oh, okay. So George, this is the one that I think was the one I was telling you the other day.
Yeah. And they actually told us that they were having a discussion last Friday with MetaMask to see about the best way to render those NFTs. So we'll see what comes out.
To me, it sounds like maybe we should take this in a different call to really carve out the details. You know, what is going to change and what isn't going to change for the launch. Then I hear some ideas, but maybe we should refine them a little bit more to, make clear what mutations we're going to need to make.
Yeah, sure. They seem to be very like independent from each other. And this dispatch one is completely. Oh well, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say there's nothing to do on our side, but actually there is. Yeah. So yeah. All right. Okay, we can have another call for notifications. All right. So thanks everyone, and see you on Slack if there's no other question.
Bye bye. See you everyone.
See you guys. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
What was the last one to leave? Why so? I wonder why they're on Slack and not on Discord.
And be like, the vote's really close. They got appealed a whole bunch of times, and it's like 52-48. Maybe there should be a fork, because in Kleros, you know, the Schelling point oracle, it deals with frequently subjective cases. So the system, like, there might be a narrow case that has that's 52-48 support that's just due to reasonable people disagreeing. So you could have a question like on the left here where, you know, it's like a subtle question, maybe it's an edge case, maybe it's just poorly defined. And people vote different ways, and it looks really close, but it's just close because of sort of natural disagreements. This question is from a famous ogre case that like got appealed like a whole bunch of times in passing. But like at the same time, you could also have a situation where there's a 51% attacker, and the system can't necessarily tell those things apart by itself. So on the right, it's the same voting percentages, but like now, you know, the devil seems to have a 51% attack. And a solution to this is basically a hybrid voting system, where you still provide your ranked vote. You're like, okay, A is better than B, you know, C is worse. And you need that in order for the system to be able to produce like a Schelling point outcome that like, you know, fits within the system that was used in the preceding appeal rounds. But also you provide an approval vote. So if you're in this like forking module, you're going to say, okay, like, I think that like A or B would both kind of be acceptable if it comes to it. Or some people might be like, no, only A is acceptable, B is trash. And the rationale for this is that if you're in an edge case where everybody just like is disagreeing for natural reasons, you can approve of everything. You can be like, okay, yeah, like I think A's better, but like everything is fine. There's no attack here. And then there will be no fork. Whereas if you think that one of the options is an attack, then you don't approve of that, and you can potentially wind up on a fork. So like, what's interesting about this is that like when you get to this stage where you're at the, you know, like you've drawn in the whole community and you're debating about whether or not there should be a fork, it is kind of both a Schelling oracle vote and a governance vote. It's about like there's a question of what the future of the community is going to be. So you kind of have two voting systems for these like two goals. Okay, so just to wrap up, we saw that like there's this fundamental distinction between these kinds of different voting situations about where voters' incentives come from, and this leads to shared goals and also some differences. So like different things you want to keep in mind. So, and I hope that whether you're designing a DAO, like voting mechanism, or a Schelling point oracle, when looking and thinking about these sort of differences, like the sort of comparison can illuminate like things within your own point of view. Okay, so thank you. Questions?
Thank you. I was wondering because like you were speaking about the DAO voting, but like it's very different from Kleros because on DAOs people tend to vote for their own reward, whereas on Kleros most of the disputes have like a right solution. Like there is a determinate like something that objectively is the good answer.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like is there a different voting system that you need or?
Yeah. So like, you know, like. That maybe have been a point that I should have like, you know, more emphasized that, you know, you think of Kleros as having a distinct true answer versus like you know, like sort of personal preferences. That's true. You know, so like that's something that's worth highlighting. So like according to what I was trying to go back with the like themes of the talk is that like you have a lot of common challenges. You still want to avoid vote splitting. It's still probably a bad idea to use plurality. But if you're, you know, like what beyond that, what the requirements are can be subtle. And basically the answer is yes, you need like slightly different priorities in your voting system. So like my argument is like, well, like in order to disincentivize lazy voting, which is like more of a problem with DAOs, or more of a problem with Schelling oracles than with DAOs, because people are voting for their preferences with DAOs, so they're not necessarily incentivized to be lazy. You need like something that, like in a voting incentive system that better leverages the economics to get people to exert effort. And then there's like argument that ranked voting is better in this circumstance. Whereas if you're on a DAO, like maybe like an approval vote is like more appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks, Kleros.